German Chancellor Olaf Scholz meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing today, the first time a European leader visited China in more than 2 years. Xi telling him that China and Germany should respect one another and take care of each other's core interests. Joining me now, Rogue States Project President Harry Kazianis. Harry, this is all happening ahead of a potential Biden-Xi meeting at the G20 summit. What do you make of this Germany-China tete-a-tete?
You know, Dagan, it's funny. You know, Xi Jinping talks about Germany respecting China's core interests and vice versa. That's just code for China basically asking Germany to respect its potential conquering of Taiwan or the South China Sea or the East China Sea, or China dominating the world with its trade and shady trade practices. So to be honest with you, I don't even know why the German chancellor even went to China. It's not helpful in any way. It's not like Xi's going to change his foreign policy goals. In fact, Dagan, it would have been more helpful if the German chancellor had actually went to Moscow to try and figure out something we can do with Ukraine with Russian President Vladimir Putin. So
that was what I was thinking, is given the energy crisis brought on because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and then the subsequent back and forth, cutting off natural gas supplies. Is this Germany's way of going through China to try and, again, find some energy supplies for Europe?
I mean, look, it's very possible. I mean, the Germans are going to do anything they possibly can to avert a major energy crisis throughout the whole European continent. But I don't think going to China, you know, kowtowing to them is going to be very effective at all. I mean, the Chinese are going to be looking for any leverage they can out of Germany to try and increase their exports to Germany. So I don't think this is helpful in any way whatsoever. If the Germans are trying to do something to alleviate their energy problems, the only way to do that is to try and to end this war in Ukraine in some respect, especially now when the United States actually has troops in Ukraine and this crisis is getting worse and worse. So I don't think this is effective in one way at all.
Christian, jump in.
Harry, North Korea has been acting up lately. You have a number of ballistic missile and other missile launches, and there's even some talk that Kim Jong-un may test a nuclear weapon for the first time since 2017. Of course, in many ways, North Korea is an appendage of China politically. A little bit of an overstatement there. But what do you think the North Koreans are up to, and why have they chosen this time?
Simple, Christian. The reason why the North Koreans are doing all this testing now is because they can. They understand that the Biden administration has almost no leverage on them. I mean, we have sanctioned North Korea every possible way we can. But unfortunately, with North Korean exports and essentially the entire North Korean economy running through China one way or another, there's very little that we can do to really stop North Korea's ambitions. And they know the Chinese are not going to support any more sanctions, and they're certainly not really going to do much to enforce the existing sanctions that are already on the books. So I think in the next weeks and months to come, you are going to see the North Koreans test one, maybe even two nuclear weapons, and I think you're going to see them test more of those intercontinental ballistic missiles, which are very important to North Korea because those are the missiles that could hit Washington, New York, Chicago, etc.
Dave, jump in.
Yeah, I'm just noticing, Harry, maybe you could comment on this. Starting this week on Monday, there were exercises between the United States and South Korea. The United States is flying 1,600 sorties. That's 240 aircraft. As this escalates, you know, how long before these two sides where, you know, just possibly a lone pilot on either side could make a mistake and cause an unintended incident?
I mean, this is the danger, Dave. I mean, the challenge is right now the North Koreans are testing so many different missile platforms. I mean, they have surpassed by leaps and bounds the amount of missiles they tested in 2017, which almost created a nuclear crisis, if you remember. It wasn't that long ago. So the challenge here is God forbid if the North Koreans test a missile, and we know these missiles aren't exactly the most reliable. One, God forbid, lands in South Korea or Japan or some sort of wreckage injures a poor innocent soul. That will put us on the path to a war with North Korea. And I'll tell you something right now. A war with North Korea will become a nuclear war, especially when the North Koreans have very little intelligence. When, God forbid, they launch an attack on South Korea, we attack back. The North Koreans have made it very clear they would launch a full nuclear strike on ports, bridges, all the infrastructure in South Korea to prevent the United States from massing troops and doing any sort of regime change type operation. And that means millions of people would die in that scenario. So I think I'm very glad to see Fox doing a lot of coverage on North Korea because a lot of the media has just completely forgot about this, and it's very important.
Before we go, Harry, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will travel to India next week and Indonesia in 2 weeks for the G20 summit. Yellen is hoping to strengthen economic ties between the U.S. and India and try to overcome G20 divisions over, of course, Russia and its war on Ukraine. Your thoughts about her trip there and if she can actually accomplish anything?
Well, I think it's important to lay the groundwork. I think for the longest time, the United States has really underappreciated India in trying to bring India into the West. It was part of the non-aligned movement during the Cold War. It is a vital country that we need to be much more aligned with, especially as the Indians have very tight relationships with Russia. In fact, if you look at the Indian military, for example, it's completely kitted out with Russian military goods. So we need to try to convince the Indians to come join, be a bigger part of the West. And hopefully Janet Yellen can accomplish a little bit of that at least, or at least lay the groundwork.
Harry Kazianis, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks, Dagan.